Okay, welcome back. This is week 6 of the Mind Bend series on eradicating addiction. I'm Dr. O'Connor. I am your host and the creator of this content. So this week, we are going to talk about cleaning. And what I mean by cleaning is we are going to take all of the information that we learned about ourselves that we dredged up from last week, right, that we talked about with someone else. We are going to learn how to take those responses, those behaviors, those emotions that create things like anger, shame, guilt, remorse, etc., and turn those into more functional patterns so that we can create responses, behaviors that create things like self-respect, self-confidence, happiness, positive engagements with other people, etc. Okay, so we're going to come up with a systematic way to clean out all of that stuff and bring in new patterns that cultivate different energetic responses from us and from other people. You can look at this as an actual wound, okay? You can use the analogy of a really deep burn, for instance, okay? When someone has a really deep burn, we have to go in and debride the wound over and over again until a functional protective layer of skin has formed over the top of that wound. It's not different with this. We have to basically go through the process of cleaning out these densities and these responses and filling them in with new, more functional behaviors until we have completely formed a functional barrier, a functional layer of skin over the top of the wound. Okay, so this is not that much different. It takes multiple rounds, but if you stick to it and are really clear with yourself about what exactly you're replacing the old behaviors with, it can happen relatively quickly. Okay, so that's more or less what we're going to be covering this week. For symptom management, before we do anything with our interval, I would encourage you to, if you are able to do this safely and incorporate some harm reduction methods to make sure that this happens safely, I would like you to take a day of unrestricted use before you do anything with your interval. Okay, so I would like you to do this with as much damage control as possible. Okay, same as last time we did this. So make sure you have someone to drive you if you're going to be going places. Make sure you warn your family. Make sure you warn anyone that is in your everyday life or your inner circle that you're taking this time to do this. Just make sure that you set yourself up to not create any more problems for yourself, because the purpose of doing this is to show ourselves that there's nothing there. Okay, and while there may be a tiny bit of pleasure at the very beginning of use, especially if there's been a prolonged period of time where there's been restriction or something like that, it very quickly turns into something that is not pleasurable and is not fun and is not good for us or anyone else. And so the reason that we are taking these days of calculated use is to continue to affirm that and demonstrate it to ourselves. So as you go into this day, keep that in mind and be looking out for that. Okay, the purpose is to understand what it isn't, that there's nothing special there, that there's nothing to hold on to, that indulging in use does not do anything beneficial for us or anyone else. Okay, so take your day, do what you need to do in there. While you're in there, pay particular attention to anything negative that comes up, anything negative in terms of physical sensations, in terms of physical discomfort, anything negative in terms of thought patterns, in terms of thought content, what's actually being played over and over again in your head, okay? And anything negative in terms of emotions, shame, guilt, fear, anger, those kinds of things. We want to pay particular attention to these things because we're really doing our best to associate the use with these things. Because once our brain does that, where it's like, oh, this is paired to negative things that happen, not positive, it becomes a lot easier to utilize a different neural pathway, which we are currently building. So be very mindful of that as you engage in your day of use before we reset the time interval. So after you do that, I want you to go as long as you can without using at all. Okay, so you take your day or whatever where you kind of have a free-for-all with yourself. You do what you need to do, you use as much as you want, and then after that is done, go as long as you can without any use. Okay, and also notice what comes up in that period of time after the day of unrestricted use. It helps to write this stuff down. Even if you're not journaling a lot, it helps to write down what exactly is coming up at these different stages of things. Okay, so pay close and careful attention to that. Once you have gone as long as you can, I want you to sit and think about what a new interval could look like in terms of its duration. Okay, are you already having a difficult time holding the interval that you previously set? Is that starting to feel easy? Are you feeling like I'm ready to just do away with this entirely and just try to not use it all? Where are you at with this? How ready are you to let it go, would you say? So for example, if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't want to extend the interval, I really just feel like I want to stay where I am, you're still holding on quite a bit to the addiction itself. Versus if you're in a place where you're like, I have absolutely had it with this, I don't want to use anymore, I don't want to keep going back to this, and I really would just rather not do it at all. That demonstrates a more ready willingness to let the addiction go. Okay, so there's different stages of this. One's not better or worse than the other. It just is what it is. So if you're still in this place of kind of clinging, you'll get to the place where you're ready to let it go. But just notice where you are. Okay, so for the different stages of things, we'll call them, there are different ways that we can move forward from this point. If you are still feeling like very clingy when it comes to the addiction, like you don't really want to spread out the interval, like you still need it for whatever reason, maybe just set your interval for a little bit longer. Okay, maybe even like 10 or 15 minutes longer or something like that, depending on what you're working on and how long the interval is already. So don't set any goals for yourself that you're not going to be able to accomplish, basically. So if you're still feeling very insecure surrounding prolonging this, just make it a little bit longer and do your best with it, okay? Aside, if you are unable to hold the interval that you have already set for yourself, do not proceed forward with this. Wait until you have found an interval that is attainable for you before you keep marching forward. Do not just stampede through this stuff without solidifying that. So if you're not there yet, it's okay, but take the time to make sure that you've established that. Okay, so if you're still feeling clingy, maybe just set the interval for a little bit longer. If you're feeling sort of in the middle with it, where you're like, I definitely feel ready to go longer, I definitely don't feel ready to let it go entirely, then have a real and honest conversation with yourself about what you are ready for in terms of the interval duration, and go ahead and set it and try it, and if you fail the first couple of times, maybe give it a couple more times before you decide to shorten it. Okay, so pick something that's going to challenge you, that's going to sort of take you to your edge without it being completely unattainable. So if that's where you are, pick something that's substantially longer, but not completely unattainable for yourself. If you are at the point where you have absolutely had it, you're disgusted with the addiction, you don't want anything to do with it, you feel very ready to let it go, I would recommend trying to do that. Okay, so at some point from here through the end of this series, this will most likely be a space that you inhabit frequently before you let the thing go entirely. So if you are there now, I would recommend just stop, hold the interval or any period of time really for as long as you can before using again. And if you don't feel like you need to use again, then don't. Okay, because at some point you're going to get to a point where you're like, damn, it's been, like 10 days and I don't want to go back into that. I don't. And you don't have to. So that's the goal. We're trying to get to this place where you're like, I've already gone this long without this thing. Do I really want to spark this whole chemical imbalance and this thing that, do I really want to go back into this again? And eventually the answer to that question is going to be no every single time. So if you feel ready to pitch it, pitch it. Pitch it and see what happens and see how long you can go and see if you need to go back to it. Now, here's where you have to be a little bit careful with this. If you say, I'm done with this, I'm pitching it, whatever, and then for some reason you fall back into it, which is extremely common, do not shit on yourself. Do not worry about it. Do not fall into this narrative that like you're absolutely fucked if you relapse or something like this. No. Just do your best to analyze what happened, what triggered you, what came up, okay? The same things that we've been doing throughout the entirety of this lecture series. So continue to examine these things and keep trying. Just keep trying. If you're at a point where you're ready to pitch it, I don't care if you screw up 1 or 2 times, just keep trying to pitch it. And eventually you'll get to a point where you're going to get triggered. Something's going to happen and you're going to be like, damn, I really want a cigarette. But you're going to be like, do I? And the answer is actually going to be no. And it's going to be authentic. Okay. Whether it's a cigarette or a drink or whatever your deal is. Okay. There's going to be a point where the answer to the question of like, do I actually want to engage this behavior in order to cope with this other thing? The answer to that question is going to be no every single time. Okay, so there's a number of different ways we're going to approach this depending on your readiness to let the thing go. If you're not ready to let it go, do not judge yourself. Just keep going with the intervals. It will come. The way that this work sets in, or maybe like the amount of time that it takes to clear out certain things and bring in other things, is different for every single person. So just be patient. It will happen. Also, we all have different speeds at which we are able to create neuroplasticity, to generate new habits, to form new habits, break old habits. Everyone has a different pace with this. And this is exactly the skill that we're trying to cultivate. And the more that you practice it, like any other skill, the better you get at it. So the more you do this, where you actively are engaged in a process of either moving away from something that you need to quit and or simultaneously moving towards something that you're trying to incorporate, it will get faster and faster and easier and easier. So just keep that in mind as you move forward, okay? There's nothing wrong with being slow at this at first, because everyone is slow at this at first. And then after you practice over and over and over again, you're not slow at it. And it gets easier and it gets faster, and it isn't this sort of grueling process every single time. So just stick with it. You are going to continue to sit in the morning for at least 10 minutes. In this sitting session, I want you to be reflecting on what it feels like to not want to use. Okay. And if you haven't hit this point, start imagining what it would feel like to be free of the compulsion to engage in the behavior that you are trying to wean out. Just imagine it. Okay. So if you have actually experienced this, pull it up, sit in it, really take the time to solidify this. What you're doing here is you're digging a deeper trench for that new neural pathway. And if you haven't experienced it yet, try to imagine what it's going to feel like, so that then when it does start to come up in your daily existence, you're like, yes, that. Okay, got it. All right. So you're taking the 10 minutes in the morning. You're reflecting on this. You're reflecting on what it feels like to be free of this behavior that you're trying to wean out. Okay. In the evening, we're still going to continue the success evaluation. So you're going to ask yourself what went well, what didn't. Were you able to hold your interval? Were you able to conduct yourself in a way that you're proud of overall? If not, what are your barriers to success? What do you need in order to be successful with your interval, with your reactions to things, etc.? Okay. Thank yourself and recommit to the process for the following day. All right, so that is it for the symptom management this week. it's going to look different based on individual need. The last thing I'm going to say about this is if it absolutely wrecks you to go into a day of unrestricted use for whatever the reason is, if it's absolutely too dangerous or it absolutely causes too many problems with you and a spouse or a child or something like that, or if it causes too many disruptions in any previous commitments that you have, school, work, etc., please do not feel like you have to do that. Okay, the purpose of going back into use is to demonstrate that there's nothing there worth moving towards, because there isn't. Okay, if that is going to come with too heavy of a price, skip it and just adjust your interval in the way that we've just discussed. Okay, so there's different options depending on where you are internally. So just be honest with yourself, be real about this, and move forward with the option that's going to work best for you. Okay, so for the wound healing this week, you are going to need your map that you made for yourself from week 4. Okay, so make sure that you have that handy as you dive into this week's work here. So from week 4, you're going to review your column 2, which is your people, places, scenarios, etc., that push you into a space of wanting to use, that bring up some kind of emotional response or actual response in you that pushes you towards use. So review those things that you wrote down in column 2. Okay? Now what you're going to do is you're going to go into those places, interactions with those people, etc., that bring up this urge to use. You're going to go into those and you're going to watch what you do when you go into these things. Okay, so perhaps your trigger is someone at work. Okay, so when you go to work and you know you're working with that person, you're gonna watch your reaction to this person, and you're gonna either do one of two things. Okay, you're either going to react internally and externally the way that you always have, okay, or the way that you've conditioned yourself to. Basically, you're gonna reach for the thing that you've been reaching to from the start, right? Okay, that's one neural pathway that can get hit, the sort of default, if you will. Or you're going to go to something different, which was in column 4 of that week. Okay, so these stepping stones, these different options, if you will, in terms of what we can do instead of that way that we typically react, or the default reaction. Okay, so you're going to do one of these two things, and I want you to watch what happens when you react either number 1 with the default reaction or number 2 with something different. All right, each one is going to cultivate a different internal response, and it's not that it's going to be perfect if you are utilizing a stepping stone, or if you take something from your column 4 and apply it. Maybe it still generates something that's relatively negative, but we're looking for differences here. So as you observe yourself in each of these situations where you are directly interfacing with something that triggers you, or someone that triggers you, or a place, or whatever you wrote down, observe whether you're in a default or a new reaction. Okay, observe how you feel physically, emotionally, and mentally when you're in your default reaction versus when you are in a stepping stone reaction. Okay, something that you wrote down as an alternative to how you are reacting, behaving, etc., to the column 2 stimuli. All right, so I want you to write these things down. Okay, and I want you to try to move towards the reactions that are cultivating things like self-confidence, that cultivate things like happiness or improved communication between you and another person. Perhaps you have a tendency to lose your patience with this person that you work with, and instead you calmly but clearly explain to this person, why you feel the way you feel or what you need to change in order for things to move forward in a more productive direction. Okay, so obviously losing your temper with someone and having clear, explicit conversations, those are two different things. And while you may still feel some anger come up in the second scenario, what we're trying to really look for here is the ability to move away from things that create problems and messes to clean up, if you will, and move towards things that are cultivating real solutions to the problem, both internally and in the way that you're interacting with other people. Okay, so when you gut check this, you're gonna say, okay, so when I default to this reaction with this person or with this setting, this is what comes up in me. And you label it and you write it down and you figure out a way to sort of tag it, if you will, in terms of what comes up in the way of physical sensations. Maybe you hold it in your chest, maybe you hold it in your stomach, maybe it creates tension in your neck, so there are different ways people carry these things. So however it works for you to tag that, I want you to tag it. And when you say, all right, so this is the thing, this is the literal thing that comes up when I am in communication with or in proximity to or whatever these various stimuli. Okay, I want you to do the same thing when you react differently, when there's implementation of a stepping stone instead of utilization of the default. Okay, so again, feel how this comes up in your body. Maybe it starts out the same, right? Like I have this frustration, but then I share clearly and directly how it's affecting me with this person. And I also give a clear verbal testament to what I need in order for this to get better. And all of a sudden it calms down. I feel open. I feel spacious. The pain isn't there. The tension isn't there, whatever. So that's the kind of thing we want to move towards. Okay, so we're trying to literally feel into these different things that we can do in response to things that we know trigger us, that we know push us towards use. And we are trying to experiment with different stepping stones to see what feels the best. How does it feel when you conduct yourself this way versus this way? It's pretty simple, but it does require some very intentional observation at first. So get really clear about this. How does it feel to be in the default way of reacting to things versus how does it feel to be in one of the stepping stones that I've created for myself? Okay, so you're going to use your map for this. You have a very clear set of written testimony to what exactly is going to set you off, how you typically respond to that, and then the stepping stones. You've already made this for yourself. So all you're doing is you're acting this out. And what you're looking for is to experience less of this urge to use, of the anxiety that comes up, of any anger that comes up, etc., and bring in more of the spacious, happy, peaceful, still, self-confident energy that comes with utilizing different interventions in response to these different stimuli. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. We're moving towards the stepping stones that feel better than the default way of responding. Once you get to a point with this where you've experimented enough and you're like, okay, so when I respond this other way in these circumstances, I notice that this drastically improves the way that I feel on the inside, and it also drastically improves the way that I'm able to carry myself in the world and interact with other people or whatever. When you find column 4 or stepping stone things like this, commit to responding to whatever, anything that causes sort of this internal experience that you have, okay? Whatever feelings the trigger is causing, commit to reacting to it in those ways that feel like they are tremendously more beneficial than utilizing your default way of handling things. Okay, so if you can commit to a few of these, for example, if there's different things that you listed in your column 2, which there should have been. So perhaps you found like, okay, well, when I interact with this thing that I wrote down in column 2, I've learned that when I respond this way, I get much better results. So just commit to doing that. Just commit to doing that in response to your interaction with that particular column 2 variant. Okay, and so kind of go down the column 2 list with this and commit to a alternative behavior, a column 4 stepping stone behavior that feels right for you. We're trying to keep this really simple. So all we're doing here is we're saying, okay, we know that we react in this negative way to these things. So now I'm going to commit to reacting in this other way when I interface with these known things. So what that's going to do is it's going to weaken the default way of responding, and it's going to strengthen the stepping stone way of responding. Now, what you do in this column 4 in the stepping stone, that's going to change, but right now our priority is weakening the default and strengthening the new. Okay, so commit to something in response to each of these triggers and just show up that way regularly. This promotes consistency for you. This promotes consistency for other people so that you're not kind of all over the place in the way that you're responding to things. And this promotes consistency internally, okay, for your nervous system, for your brain, etc. So pick some things that you know are superior to how you've been showing up with your default reactions. Commit to them. We're going to hold this for the next prolonged period of time. Okay, so choose responses that are going to be available to you even when you feel anger coming up, even when you're stressed, even when you feel like you don't have a lot of reserves or whatever. Try to choose stepping stones that you know are going to be available to you. Because again, the goal is to weaken the default and strengthen the stepping stone. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be superior to what you've been doing and available to you. All right. So we are going to hold that, all right, for a number of weeks here moving forward. And again, the column 4 stuff is going to change, but right now, pick something, stick to it. Also worth noting, external approval, meaning approval from other people, approval from companies, approval from your boss, etc. That is not the goal with this, okay? And oftentimes that seeking of validation is what gets us into these situations in the first place. So what we're looking for here in our new responses and our column 4 responses, we're trying to develop reactions to difficult circumstances, okay, that don't involve self-abandonment, that do involve respectful communication, and that are consistent, okay? Now, not everyone is going to like whatever stance you take. And if everyone does like whatever new column 4 reaction or stepping stone you're implementing, I would be very carefully examining that for people pleasing and need for validation, okay? Because if you're pleasing everyone, you're most likely abandoning yourself, which is absolutely not what we are trying to do here. So when you find something that works, make sure that it works for you. Make sure that it does not go against your moral compass. Make sure that it is something that feels like it is protecting you and helping you to be a better person and, taking care of you, not worrying about the response that it's eliciting from other people, okay? So an example of this is, so I have a coworker, and this has happened to me a lot with different people over the years, but this just recently happened. So we'll use this one, who will sometimes want me to look on her Instagram at different memes, etc., etc., etc. And I don't like to engage social media that way. So in the past, I did find myself sort of watching these things to sort of pacify or go along with or whatever. And recently I decided that I was going to respond to requests to look at other people's social media page of no. If I wanted to look at social media, I would use my own social media page and I would look at memes. And that's how I feel about it. And she actually responded really nicely. However, my firm stance in that has not always gone super well with people, and it can be really touchy for people, and they don't like being told no if you neglect to, engage with something that they're engaging with frequently, etc. So just be aware that you may have to say no. You may have to be really clear about, this doesn't work for me. I'm unwilling to engage in this with you, or this doesn't feel fair of you to ask of me and I'm not going to agree to it, or whatever. Just make sure you leave space and appropriate amount of consideration for instances where you actually need to say no, because there are going to be a lot of those. And a lot of times when things trigger us, it's because we say yes when we should be saying no. So make sure you just take a really careful look at that column 2 and get really clear on where your line is with things, like, am I willing to look at someone else's social media to make them laugh or whatever? Like, no, I'm not willing to do it. So I'm holding it there. Perhaps down the line, there's a way that I will learn how to deal with that is superior or easier for other people to hear, etc. But that's where it is right now. This is the kind of thing that you're looking for. Okay, so if something is happening, or if someone is consistently asking you to do something that doesn't feel right for you, you have to pay attention to that. And so you have to weave that in to your column 4 or your stepping stone responses, okay? Because otherwise we're swapping a response of anger, of shame, of self-abandonment, whatever, for another reaction of self-abandonment. Maybe one that gets us more approval from people, but all in all the same thing. So we don't want to move towards self-abandonment. We want to move away from that. So make sure that whatever you're choosing and however you're going about implementing these things is true for you and feels good for you and feels in alignment for what you specifically need as a person. And no one has that information but you. So you have the responsibility to make sure that as you engage in this process of programming different responses to different things, different people, etc., that you are doing so in a way that is not involving self-abandonment. Okay, very important. So be really clear about this as you move forward. And also as you begin experimenting with different responses, this may come into clarity. It may become clear very quickly where you need to make some alterations to make sure that you're accounting for yourself, your needs, where you're at with healing specific wounds, etc. Okay, this will change over time. Once there's a firm layer of skin, so to speak, over the burn, you won't need to be so guarded. You won't need to be so kind of on edge with things, whatever. But perhaps you need to be right now. And there's something to be said for protecting something until it is healed. So just know that the column 4 will change over time, and you may need to be making accommodations for yourself that are a reflection of where you are in healing your core wounds. So be mindful of this, be real about it, choose things that you can implement regularly and consistently and that are going to feel good for you on the inside. That's what you want to move towards, okay? Practice this over and over and over and over again. The reason that we're choosing, kind of one thing per trigger, if you will, is because we are trying to lay down these new pathways, this new framework. So this is going to take repetition over and over and over again. So when you can, when you're resourced to do this, perhaps even seek out scenarios, people, engagements, whatever, that you know are going to hit these nerves and affect you in this way, so that you can practice showing up in the new way. Okay. And even if you don't seek them out, they'll find you. Don't worry. So just keep implementing them. This is why it's important to be very clear on how you are going to react when certain things come up. It's also why it's important to be very clear what exactly is coming up. Okay. That's why using certain physical symptoms, associations as kind of tags for different emotional, energetic experiences can be really helpful, right? So you notice like, oh, I have this feeling in my throat. I'm not saying something that I should be saying, or like, you know, whatever it looks like for you. It's different for different people. But tagging these things can be helpful. So you're like, okay, I've tagged this. I know that this feeling comes up when this happens. And I know that my different response is this. So that's what I'm going to do. It just simplifies the whole thing. So that's what you want to be working on. If you are not feeling like, you know, maybe you work from home or you don't get a lot of interaction with other people or whatever, like I said, seek out situations that hit these things inside of you so that you can practice working on these, because the more you're able to practice them, the more you're able to successfully, you know, kind of repeat the stepping stone to response, the quicker that default response is going to fall away and the new one is going to become dominant. Okay. So keep working on this, keep practicing it. Don't stop. And also expect yourself to resort back into the default way of responding, especially early on in the beginning, especially if you're super stressed, especially if you're under-resourced. Okay, that's typically when the default starts showing up, when those things are true. So be gentle with yourself if that's happening. Also do what you need to do to replenish yourself and figure out what those things are, because that's going to give you what you need to show up differently in terms of fuel. Okay, so be watching out for those things. So what we're doing in this is physically, we are rewiring the brain, okay? We're weakening certain responses, certain neural pathways, while strengthening others, all right? And in the strengthening of others, we are transmuting what used to happen when the default reaction would be how we played things out, right? So default response generates things like shame, anger, whatever. So we're replacing that with a new response that we are programming physically that cultivates inner peace, self-confidence, etc. Okay, so on a physical level, we're working on wiring our brains in a way that is going to cultivate different energetic, emotional responses when these pathways get lit up. That's why we are choosing, personally creating and tailoring to fit our own needs, and choosing pathways that are going to cultivate these new things versus sort of sitting in these anger, shame spirals, etc. Okay, so that's what we're doing on a physical level. Emotionally, we are moving towards responses that cultivate emotions that are stable, that are less dense, that are sustainable. Okay, it's not all going to be rainbows and butterflies, but at least if you're in a place where you're like, well, I said what I needed to say without it involving anger, hostility, whatever, and it was hard to say, but after that conversation, I feel more connected to myself. I feel like I can trust myself more, etc. Those are the emotional shifts that we're moving towards. So that's what we are cultivating on an emotional level. We're cleaning out all of the old, unacknowledged, unidentified things, patterns that create the things that we're trying to get away from, right? They create the fear, they create the anger, and we're moving towards different emotions, okay? And obviously these things play into each other, because if you're more stable emotionally, your nervous system is going to be healthier and more stable, your brain is going to work better, your neurotransmitter ratios are going to start to level out, okay? The more you're doing, less you're doing this all over the place, and you're angry and you're pissed and you're this and you're that, and then you're shamed and you're depressed and that is a lot for your physical body and your nervous system to keep up with. So if you're consistently engaging in behavioral patterns that constitute well-being, that constitute different things in a positive way, that is going to benefit you physically. It's going to benefit you emotionally. Okay. These things are all related. Mentally, I guess what I mean by mentally is the mental dialogue that plays in our head is also going to shift. Okay. So maybe when you're in the default, make it a point to observe what's going on in terms of a mental dialogue for you, in terms of that voice in your head that's constantly talking. We're going to look at what is it saying. So maybe, again, with the coworker, maybe if it's a difficult dynamic with someone you work with, maybe it's saying all kinds of nasty things about that person. Maybe it's talking about, oh, this job is so stupid and you didn't want it in the first place. There's all kinds of things that it could be coming up with. So pay attention to what it's saying when you're in the default response versus when you're showing up differently, because what you will notice is that the narrative changes. The mental narrative changes when we start utilizing these different neural pathways, and we get less negative and we get more positive and we get less angry and resentful and bitter, and we get more confident and happy and well-rounded, etc. So that's also going to be a very dramatic swing as we start to show up differently, utilizing these different stepping stone behaviors. Okay, so watch for that. And spiritually, what we're doing is we're cleaning out all of this poisonous junk that comes up every time one of these wounds get hit. Okay, so again, with the burn, it's like if you irritate it, if you pour a bunch of dirt on it, if you poke it and it's not healed or whatever, it's going to start seeping stuff. The same thing happens with these emotional responses, right? So these column 2 things that happen, basically, it's people, places, whatever that poke at these things. We start seeping out poison. It starts seeping from us. Okay. We get angry, we get bitter, we get resentful, we get, all kinds of different things, or we get small and we get scared and we get ashamed or whatever. These very different flavors and colors of poison that gets emitted when these things get hit. So spiritually, we are cleaning these out, these wounds, and we're taking care of them so that they don't seep poison anymore. And we heal them. And we heal them by showing up differently, and we heal them by enveloping them in these different energies and emotions that show up when we show up differently. Okay, so and all of these levels, all of these layers are related to one another. You can't affect one without affecting the other. So we're working on, a lot of different planes here, if you will. But it's important to remember that as you commit to this and show up differently, you are changing yourself on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level. And you are evolving physically, emotionally, and spiritually as a result of which. So it's kind of cool when you can really start to feel that. So keep up with it. Make sure you are getting to a point where you're able to implement the column 4 choices with regularity, okay? And you will start to feel these shifts, and you will start to notice these differences. The more you can write about these differences, the better, because what's going to happen is in a few months, you're going to look back and you're going to go, oh my gosh, wow, and you're going to be able to apply what you've written down in this first round of things to future rounds of this. And it's going to help it go faster, because we're very forgetful. Human beings are very forgetful. So the more you can document what's happening for you and document very stark changes in sort of, the before and after, if you will, or, the default new behavior, whatever you want to call it, the more you can write down about this stuff, the better, because it's going to lend to a more fluid, streamlined, fast process as you start to apply this skill to other parts of your life. Okay. It's just going to make it easier. So try to do as much writing as you can as you go through this. As you start to show up differently, I want you to be regularly asking yourself, whether you're asking, the innate intelligence of your body or the universe or God, if that's your jam, or whoever, anyone to help you to show up differently and implement these new things. I want you to be calling in all the help you can for yourself as you are especially as you're in these early stages of doing things differently. It's really hard to kind of lay that first track. Once it's in there, it gets easier, but be regularly asking for this help and you will get it. And you may get it in the way of opportunities to practice it. Okay. You may be like, does the universe hate me because I'm just getting hit with all kinds of shit from all different directions? And so perhaps you are getting a lot of opportunities to practice a lot of this, right? Maybe that's how you get your answer. Or maybe, you experience profound inner peace that is new for you when you start to show up with a specific column 4 intervention or something like that. But there's different ways this can show up, but just be asking for help, okay? From yourself, from the higher ups, from wherever you pull your beliefs from, and it will happen. So try to do this throughout the day as you move in your interactions with other people and as you move into situations that are going to be challenging specifically, and it'll go a little bit faster, okay? And know that every time you show up differently, every time you react differently and in a way that helps you to let go of things like anger, things like fear, every time you do that, you are cleaning. You are cleaning emotional wounds. You are cleaning spiritual wounds. You are cleaning your human psyche. Okay, so just keep doing that. Keep cleaning until you have a spotless home. And at some point, you'll get to a place where it will be maintenance cleaning. And that is a really nice place to get to. But until then, just don't stop. Keep showing up differently until you find things that are available and attainable and that work. And just know that when you find these things and you're able to show up in these ways, you are cleaning out all of the stuff that frequently gets put in the back of the metaphorical closet, so to speak. Okay, you're doing the work of cleaning all that out. And there's really no other work, I don't think, that's more important to engage in as a human being. So be really kind to yourself as you move forward into this work, and appreciate that you're willing to, scrub the toilets, get back in that closet, however you want to look at it. Because while it is hard, there's no other work that is more rewarding and more important for your own personal evolution and for our collective evolution. So keep cleaning, keep looking for, pockets of poison, keep looking for areas where you show up in a way that you aren't proud of, and find ways that you can do it differently. And in doing this, you're cleaning, okay? So take some time with this one. Take the time you need. If you feel ready to move forward in a week, we'll see you for week 7. And as always, if you need to take longer, take longer. Be true to yourself. So good luck with this week content, and we'll see you in a week. Thank you.